The microphone hit the studio floor with a metallic clang that echoed through the Family Feud set, like a gunshot. Steve Harvey stood frozen, his eyes locked on the 12-year-old boy in the wheelchair, who had just given an answer that stopped time itself. The audience of 300 people fell silent. Camera operators forgot to adjust their shots. Even the producers in the control booth stopped whispering into their headsets. Because in that moment, everyone understood. They weren't watching television anymore. They were witnessing something sacred. It had started as Tuesday's regular taping at the Steve Harvey Studios in Atlanta. The Rodriguez family from San Antonio was facing off against the Patterson family from Nashville. Standard setup, standard energy, standard laughs. Steve was in his element, wearing his signature charcoal gray suit with a white shirt and patterned tie, working the crowd with that infectious smile that had made him America's favorite game show host. But there was something different about this taping from the moment the Rodriguez family walked onto the stage. At the end of their lineup stood 12-year-old Timothy Rodriguez in a modern black wheelchair, wearing a red hoodie, blue jeans, and white sneakers that looked brand new. His short dark brown hair was neatly combed, and despite his young age, there was something remarkably composed about his presence. Something that suggested this boy had seen more of life than most adults. "And who do we have here?" Steve had asked during family introductions, kneeling down to Timothy's level, as he always did with younger contestants. The studio lights caught the metallic frame of the wheelchair, but Steve's attention was entirely focused on the boy's face. "I'm Timothy Rodriguez," he had replied clearly, his voice stronger than his small frame might suggest. "I'm 12 years old, and I'm here representing my family." "Timothy, that's a strong name for a strong young man," Steve had said with genuine warmth. "And what do you want to be when you grow up?" Timothy had paused then, his hands gripping the armrests of his wheelchair slightly tighter. When he spoke, his voice carried a weight that caught Steve off guard. "I want to be like my dad was." The audience had let out a collective awe, but Steve noticed something in Timothy's tone, something in the past tense that made him look at the boy just a moment longer than usual before moving on to the next family member. The game progressed normally for the first 2 rounds. The Rodriguez family had taken an early lead with some solid answers, and Steve was creating those moments of connection that made Family Feud more than just a game show. Timothy's older sister Maria was quick with her responses. His Aunt Rosa brought energy to every answer, and his Uncle Carlos had the crowd laughing with his animated reactions. But it was clear that Timothy was the heart of the family. Every time someone got a good answer, they looked to him first for approval. When the scoreboard lit up with points, his smile was the brightest thing in the studio. And Steve, with his decades of experience reading families, could see that this boy was carrying something much heavier than the excitement of being on television. During the 3rd round, everything changed. The category was simple enough. Name something that makes someone a hero. Maria had buzzed in first and given a solid answer, saving lives, which earned them the number 3 spot on the board. The family was celebrating, high-fiving around Timothy's wheelchair, when Steve decided to call on him directly. "Timothy," Steve said, walking over to where the boy sat at the end of the family podium. "Your turn, young man. Name something that makes someone a hero." The studio fell quiet, as it always did during these moments, the audience leaning forward in anticipation. Timothy looked up at Steve, his dark eyes reflecting the stage lights, and for just a moment, his composure wavered. His hands trembled slightly on the wheelchair's armrests. "Someone who never comes home," he said quietly. The words hung in the air like smoke. Steve's smile faltered. The audience didn't react immediately, because they weren't sure they'd heard correctly. But Steve had heard every word, and something in the way Timothy said it, the pain that leaked through despite his attempt to stay strong, hit him like a physical blow. "What did you say, son?" Steve asked, his voice softer now, no longer performing for the cameras. Timothy looked directly into Steve's eyes, and when he spoke again, his voice was clear and steady, carrying a truth too heavy for his 12 years. "Someone who never comes home. That's what makes a hero. Someone who goes away to keep other people safe and never gets to come back." The studio was completely silent now. Steve Harvey, who had hosted thousands of hours of television, who had faced every possible situation a game show could throw at him, found himself in completely uncharted territory. He could see the tears starting to form in Timothy's eyes, could see the way the boy's family was looking at him with a mixture of pride and heartbreak. Steve made a decision that would define not just that episode, but his entire understanding of what it meant to be human on television. He walked away from his podium, handed his microphone to a stunned production assistant, and knelt down in front of Timothy's wheelchair. "Timothy," he said, his voice stripped of all performance, all entertainment value. "Tell me about your dad." Behind the scenes, a producer made a decision that defied every network expectation. Keep the cameras rolling. Don't cut to commercial. The world needed to see this. Timothy's composed facade began to crack. His lower lip trembled as he reached into his hoodie pocket and pulled out a folded piece of paper, worn from being handled so many times. "He was Sergeant First Class Miguel Rodriguez," he said, his voice growing stronger as he spoke about his father. "He was deployed to Afghanistan when I was 9. He used to call me every Sunday and tell me about the kids there, how he was helping build schools and keep families safe." The camera operators continued filming, but by now everyone in the studio understood that they were witnessing something far more important than a game show. This was a boy sharing the story of a hero who would never come home. "He sent me letters," Timothy continued, unfolding the paper in his hands. "This is the last one. He wrote it the day before." His voice broke, and he couldn't finish the sentence. Steve reached out and gently took the letter from Timothy's trembling hands. "Would you like me to read it?" he asked softly. Timothy nodded, wiping his eyes with the sleeve of his red hoodie. Steve unfolded the letter carefully, his eyes scanning the neat handwriting of a soldier writing to his son. As he read silently, something happened to his face that the cameras caught in perfect detail. His jaw tightened, his eyes filled with tears, his professional mask completely disappeared. "Your dad wrote this?" Steve asked, his voice thick with emotion. 3 days before the explosion," Timothy whispered. "He didn't know I would end up in this wheelchair. He didn't know he wouldn't be coming home to take care of me. But he knew something might happen." The silence in the studio was deafening. 300 people holding their breath, watching a 12-year-old boy honor his fallen father with a courage that defied his age. Steve looked at the letter again, then at Timothy, then at the families surrounding the wheelchair. These people had driven 12 hours from San Antonio to be here, not for money or prizes, but to honor the memory of a man who had given everything for his country. "Timothy," Steve said, standing up slowly, "your father was right about one thing in this letter. You are going to be okay. You know how I know that." Timothy shook his head, his eyes never leaving Steve's face. "Because heroes don't just do heroic things. They raise heroic children. And sitting right here in front of me is proof that Sergeant Rodriguez's most important mission was a complete success." Steve turned to address the Patterson family, who had been watching from their podium with tears streaming down their faces. "I need to ask you folks something," he said. "Would you mind if we stop this game right here? This young man needs something more important than points on a board." The Patterson family patriarch, a veteran himself, didn't hesitate for even a second. "Steve, you do whatever this boy needs. Some things are bigger than games." But what happened next was something no one in the studio had ever seen before. Steve Harvey walked back to Timothy and did something that no game show host in television history had ever done. He began to remove his suit jacket, the charcoal gray jacket that had become part of his television persona, and with a gentleness that seemed impossible for hands that large, he draped it carefully over the back of Timothy's wheelchair. "Timothy," Steve said, his voice now carrying across the silent studio, "this jacket has been with me through every show, every victory, every moment that mattered to me on this stage. But right now, it belongs to you. Because when I look at you, I don't see a boy in a wheelchair. I see the son of a hero, and that makes you something special too." Timothy reached back to touch the jacket, his small fingers tracing the expensive fabric. "But Mr. Steve, I can't take your jacket. It's too nice, and "You're just what?" Steve interrupted gently. "You're just brave, you're just strong, you're just carrying your father's legacy with more grace than most adults could manage." "Timothy, this jacket doesn't make me special. But maybe, just maybe, it can remind you that you are already special, that your dad's sacrifice meant something, that his love is still here, still protecting you, still making you the hero of your own story. The audience began to react then, not with applause, but with something deeper, soft sobs, hands over hearts, the kind of emotional response that comes from witnessing something so authentic it bypasses every defense mechanism. People build around their feelings. Steve wasn't finished. He reached into his pants pocket and pulled out his personal business card, the one he gave to people he wanted to stay in touch with. He pressed it into Timothy's hand. "This has my personal number on it," he said. "Not my agent, not my manager. And here's what I need you to promise me, Timothy, when you have days where missing your dad hurts so much you can't breathe, when you have questions about being brave and you don't know who to ask, when you need to talk to someone who understands what it means to honor a hero's memory, you call that number. You understand me?" Timothy nodded, clutching the business card like it was made of gold. "But why would you do that for me?" Steve's answer came without hesitation. "Because your dad spent his last days thinking about taking care of you, and now it's my turn to help. Because heroes look out for each other, and that includes the sons of heroes." The Rodriguez family was openly crying now. Maria knelt down next to her brother's wheelchair and wrapped her arms around him. Uncle Carlos had his hand on Steve's shoulder, too overcome with emotion to speak. Aunt Rosa was dabbing her eyes with a tissue while trying to maintain her composure, but Steve had one more gesture that would define the moment forever. He turned to face the entire studio, his voice strong and clear, despite the emotion evident in his expression.
"You know what we're going to do."
Both families just became winners today, because this young man just reminded us what Family Feud is really about. It's not about the money. It's not about the points. It's about honoring the people who made us who we are. It's about family, sacrifice, and the love that continues even when someone can't come home. The Patterson family immediately left their podium and walked across the stage to join the Rodriguez family. The Pattersons' teenage daughter knelt down next to Timothy's wheelchair and took his hand. The grandmother from Nashville hugged Maria like she was her own granddaughter. What had started as a competition between two families became something entirely different, a celebration of a fallen soldier's legacy and the son who carried his memory with unshakable dignity. Steve abandoned the traditional game format entirely. He made up new questions on the spot, questions designed not to win points, but to honor Timothy's father. "Name something a soldier fights for," he asked. And when Timothy answered, "The people back home," the entire studio erupted in applause that lasted nearly a minute. "Name something that never truly dies," Steve continued, and Timothy's response of love brought several audience members to their feet. But the moment that defined everything came when Steve asked one final question. "Timothy, name something your dad would be proud of right now." Timothy was quiet for a long moment, his hands resting on Steve's jacket that now covered the back of his wheelchair like a royal robe. When he finally spoke, his voice was clear and strong, carrying the confidence of a boy who had found his way through grief to something resembling peace. "How I'm not letting what happened to my legs stop me from standing tall like he taught me." The studio exploded, not with game show applause, but with the kind of ovation reserved for moments of pure human triumph. 300 people rose to their feet, many of them crying openly, all of them understanding that they had just witnessed something that transcended entertainment and touched the very essence of what it means to be courageously, beautifully human. Steve walked back to Timothy one final time and knelt down beside the wheelchair. He whispered something in the boy's ear that the microphones didn't pick up, something that made Timothy smile through his tears. Not the brave smile of a boy trying to be strong, but the genuine, radiant smile of a child who had just been reminded that he was exactly where he belonged. Later, the producers would reveal that Steve had promised Timothy that he would personally ensure the boy had everything he needed for his physical therapy and education, that he would be there for every milestone, every achievement, every moment, when Timothy needed to remember that heroes come in many forms, including 12-year-old boys who honor their fathers by living with unshakable courage. The episode aired 2 months later and became the highest-rated Family Feud episode in the show's history. But more importantly, it sparked a movement. Veterans organizations across the country began reaching out to military families with children who had lost parents in service. A scholarship fund was established in Sergeant Rodriguez's name, and Timothy Rodriguez became a symbol of resilience, proving that sometimes the most powerful victories happen not when we win games, but when we choose to honor love in the face of loss. Today, Timothy is 15 years old and continues to inspire everyone who meets him. He still has Steve's jacket, now framed in his bedroom alongside his father's Purple Heart. And every year on the anniversary of that episode, Steve Harvey receives the same text message. Still standing tall, Mr. Steve, Dad would be proud, because that's what love looks like. That's what heroism sounds like. And that's what happens when a 12-year-old boy teaches a television studio full of adults what it really means to carry a legacy with grace.